See, you were born between 1965 and 1979, your Generation X. If you were born between 1980 and 1985, you're a Xennial. A microgeneration most people don't even know exists, but that women felt firsthand. And today, we're going to talk about it bluntly. Which of these two generations produced the men who lingered most in women's emotional memory? Which one sparked more attraction, more desire, left a deeper mark? Let's compare. No filter, no sides. The Generation X man grew up without the internet. No cell phone, no likes to validate whether he was interesting or not. He learned to pursue the hard way, eye to eye, letter in hand. Calling from a payphone, hoping she would pick up. There was no digital second chance. It was then or it wasn't. The Xennial grew up in the same school system, but he hit adolescence exactly when the internet arrived. He's the only generation that can live naturally in both worlds, analog and digital. That sounds like a small detail, but it isn't. It shaped a completely different way of relating, of seducing, of loving. Let's talk about courtship, because the way a man pursues says a lot about him. The Generation X man didn't have Tinder, no profile, no stories, no matches. He had to show up. He had to speak. He had to risk real-life embarrassment in front of everyone. And that ask any woman who lived through that time carried a weight no digital match can replicate. The Xennial lived through that phase too. But when MSN arrived, he was the first to learn how to seduce through text, the first generation to use LOL as an emotional shield. A pioneer of the hybrid game, in person by day, digital by night. He created a new language of attraction, and women responded. But what did women actually feel with each of these men? The woman who lived through the 80s and 90s says the Generation X man had presence. He showed up. He decided. He had that man who knows what he wants, energy, and back then, that was read as confidence, as protection. Today, for some women, that's a red flag. For others, it's still the standard no other man has managed to surpass. The Xennial was different. He listened. He blended the toughness of the previous generation with a sensitivity that didn't even have a name yet. He was the guy who cried during a movie, but didn't let anyone see, who felt everything, but kept almost all of it inside. That created mystery. And mystery has always been the most powerful ingredient of attraction. But not every woman wants to be pursued. Not every woman wants to be surprised with a note or an unexpected call. The independent woman who built a career, who learned to rely on herself, who didn't need a man to define her, she had a completely different perspective. To her, the Generation X man was often controlling without realizing it. He believed that knowing what he wanted also meant knowing what the woman beside him should want. That confusion between leadership and control aged very poorly. The Xennial arrived at a time when women were changing too. He grew up watching his mother work, his sister study. He had less certainty about the male role, and that uncertainty, paradoxically, created more space for her to truly exist within the relationship. It wasn't weakness, it was space. And space, to an independent woman, is worth gold. But this story has two sides, and it would be dishonest to talk about what men offered without talking about how women also changed during the same period. The Generation X woman still carried the weight of a society that expected marriage, a home, children, and a career, if there was any time left. She loved with guilt, chose with fear. Many stayed with the wrong men because leaving felt more frightening than staying. The Xennial woman arrived different. She grew up watching that contradiction in her own mother and decided she wouldn't repeat it. She entered the workforce without asking permission. Learned to say no before she learned to say yes. And when she loved with more awareness, more standards, more clarity about what she was not willing to accept. That changed the game completely, because the man who worked very well with women of one generation suddenly no longer knew how to position himself with the women of the next. And that mismatch, it created a lot of love and a lot of pain. Some people will think we're talking only about behavior, but generation also shaped a man's body, style, physical, energy. Gen X had that raw 80s and 90s aesthetic. Less grooming, less openly acknowledged vanity, but with a confidence in his own body that didn't need the gym 5 times a week to show. He occupied space in a way most men today have lost. The Xennial came during the transition, the generation that started taking care of themselves without admitting they did, wore cologne but didn't say the brand, used moisturizer but called it cream, went to the gym but said it was for health. That whole paradox had a specific charm. Women noticed and pretended they didn't, too. Attraction fades. What remains is something else. The Generation X man is part of the first mass divorce generation in the United States, not because he was a bad man, but because he married young, married under pressure, married before really knowing himself. And when the world started changing too fast, he didn't know how to change with it. The relationship was left behind. The Xennial married less, stayed together longer, experimented more before committing. He was heavily criticized for that, called commitment phobic, a perpetual adolescent. But he also made fewer mistakes in marriage, or made different ones, more conscious ones. Neither has the formula. But one of them grew up in a world that was at least starting to ask the right questions. And today, who have these men become? Gen X is between 45 and 60 years old. He's the father, the boss, the guy everyone respects in a room, but no one asks how he's doing. He carries everything inside. That's how he learned, and he no longer knows how to be any other way. The Xennial is between 40 and 45. The one who started therapy before it became trendy. The one who still listens to CDs, but also has Spotify. The one who became a meme online and took it in good humor. He stands halfway between the man he was raised to be and the man he chose to become. So here's the lingering question. Which of these men are women today still looking for? Do they even know the name of what they're looking for? We're not going to pick a winner, because there is no winner in this story. There's context. There's what each woman needed at the moment these men appeared in her life. There's what each generation was able to offer and what each one failed to deliver. Neither generation produced perfect men. They produced men shaped by the time they lived in, marked by the scars of that time. And maybe that's exactly what makes each of them unforgettable or impossible. Are you Gen X? Are you Xennial? Comment below what you think your generation did best in love and what it did worst. No defensiveness, no ego. I want to read every answer.